Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Father Aris, Metrakos, third presenter, priest at Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church in San Francisco. And if you go to San Francisco, the OCA Cathedral is also Holy Trinity, so they get confused occasionally, but we are one of two Greek Orthodox churches in San Francisco. And before I begin, I wanted to share with you a little preacher's story, because I like preacher's stories. It's an old preacher's story, so some of you may have heard it before. So if you have, don't spoil the ending. Some of you preachers may have used it before. I, in fact, have used it at least once before. But it's the story of Costa, who reposes and finds himself standing before St. Peter. And St. Peter is going through the book. He goes, well, you know, didn't really do anything majorly bad in your life, but I'm looking here. Is there anything remarkable that you've done? And Costa goes, yeah, well, in fact, there is. He goes, well, tell me about it. And Costa goes, well, I was driving down the highway one day, and there's off of the side road, there was a gang of bikers, and they had surrounded this young lady and they were menacing her. So I pulled off into that road, popped the trunk, got out my lug wrench, and I walked right over to them. I said, let that young lady alone. And in fact, I went right up to the head of the gang. Ugly cuss. He had a pierced ear and a pierced nose, and where they were connected by a chain. And he goes, yeah, what's it to you, fella? And Costa goes, I'll tell you what. And he grabs that chain and he rips it. St. Peter's going, well, when did all this happen? Is that 5 minutes ago? So, yeah. So I share that with you. I share that with you, first of all, to illustrate the power of story. And all of us know how powerful stories are, and how much the Old Testament depends on using story to tell the story of God's chosen people. How much we rely on story as we go through the New Testament, knowing that those stories are not fictional stories, but narrative stories. But they bind us, they intrigue us. Storytelling is important, I think, not to spoil lunch, or as a spoiler of lunch, but I think lunch will be wonderful. But Father Martin is going to speak extensively about stories during lunch. I share that with you also because really I look at my life and my life as a priest before coming to Holy Trinity in 2008. And I kind of feel like if you looked at my book, I'd kind of be like Costa. It's like, yeah, you didn't really, I don't know, did some bad stuff, some good stuff, but nothing remarkable. But I really am convicted that I was born to serve at Holy Trinity at this particular point in their history. And everything that happened to my life before that was a preparation for that. I feel very blessed to be there. And quite frankly, I share this story with you because I hope that once this gets out into the public domain, and people hear what I have to say, that my career doesn't go the way of Costa's life after he ripped out that chain. So we'll see what happens here. So we're going to talk about a story today, and it's the real story of what's happened at Holy Trinity since 2008 to the present time. And we use kind of a case study, which is just a way of storytelling. That's all it is. And I feel comfortable that the changes that we made to increase the health of the parish, and I really am very intrigued by this idea, in fact, in absolute agreement that increase in parish health necessarily will result in parish growth, and that is the order of business. But we'll talk about some things that we did there, and I think there are things that can be rather universally applied on one level or another. When this is all over and I get back to a decent internet connection, I'll make sure that I put various materials into a Dropbox folder. If any of y'all want access to it, just email me. And we're going to begin by talking about, my clicker has the arrows backwards. I have to get used to that. All right. We're going to talk about the state of the parish in 2008, and I think that lots of us who have been around the block, especially those who have not had the privilege of starting a church and have inherited a church, can identify with some of these things. This was the state of the parish in 2008. And I'll just go right down them. Negative income, five-figure negative income annually, bleeding money, a very high debt, especially relative to that negative income. Dissension, which means fighting among some people, but then also a lot of blame and bitterness about recent events in the parish, including that financial situation. And dissension is kind of an active thing as people fight, but blame and bitterness is really paralyzing. There was a lack of direction, and it was a very priest-dependent church. And I think at one point or another that describes a lot of our churches throughout their history. And as we tell the story of our own lives, as we ourselves struggle to repent individually, we learn to understand how we got in the predicament that we're in with regard to our behavior. Churches are the same way. So what is it that led Holy Trinity to this particular situation? A very long history. When I say long history, Holy Trinity is the oldest Greek Orthodox church west of the Mississippi, founded in 1904. Before the earthquake, the first church was destroyed. They rebuilt in 1906. They were in downtown till 1964 when they moved into a more suburban part of San Francisco that's still part of San Francisco. But throughout that history, like so many of the churches started by the great unwashed, there was no real vision except start a church, do your church thing, that's it. And as I mentioned when I talk about the pastor who was the pastor there for 49 years, it's unfair for us to go back to the people who started our churches and go, why didn't you all have a vision? It'd be like saying, why didn't you all have computers in your office? I mean, that was then, this is now. But it ends up to have a cumulative effect if you have 100+ years with no real vision. They had the same priest for 49 years. He reposed in 2004, 4 years before my arrival. And his name was Father Anthony Costuris. I never met him, only know his legacy. And it really bugs me when people criticize him, because it would be like somebody today criticizing Vince Lombardi's coaching style. It worked. I grew up in Milwaukee. I'm a Packers fan, no offense to y'all. 1965, remember when they beat Cleveland in the Bud Bowl? Those of you who were alive in 65, quite a game. That was Vince. Vince Lombardi couldn't coach in the NFL today, but he sure did a great job when he coached then. And same thing with Father Anthony. He was a man of his generation. And he ran the church, literally ran the church, paid the bills, knew everything that was going on, made every decision. But as a result of that, in his early 30s, he engineered moving the church from downtown to 8.5 acres with a massive structure. And he did that in his early 30s. His early 30s, nowadays, most people in their early 30s are still getting their feet on the ground in their careers. But because it was this single-minded kind of leadership, there was no real cultivation of stewardship, either parishioner involvement or even just giving, because Father Anthony, who was a San Francisco native, if he needed money, he would actually drive over to someone's house and say, could you stroke me a check for X number of dollars? And people would do it. He had that level of credibility and trust. People responded that way. And it worked very well until he reposed. After Father Anthony was laid to rest a few months later, another priest took over. We know that historically, if you followed a long pastorate, it can be difficult for a new priest. But the priest that followed Father Anthony had to leave very abruptly for reasons that extended beyond just because he was following a long pastorate. So that was a very abrupt change for the church. And then from that time that the new priest was there, they decided to put in a large mosaic icon in the dome. When I say large, it is considered to be the largest mosaic depiction of Christ in the Western world. And like so many parishes, this is a bit off topic. It goes more into some of the things that Steve was touching on with regard to church life cycle. They did what so many other churches did, which is you know, we don't really know where we're going, so let's put in a big old icon because that'll fix everything. And the icon project had some people who had made large verbal commitments to supporting it, and those dried up when the priest who started it left. And that it also went very drastically over budget. So you had it accumulated unexpected debt with no real idea how one was going to pay it off in a church where there was already a financial outflow every year. And so what are the things that happened in Holy Trinity, and in some ways are still happening? And they're these, and we're going to go over them one by one. And if you're following in the slide presentation, you can make notes in it. It correlates exactly to what's up here. But there are obviously things not in the slide presentation. My wife is an attorney, and when she goes to continuing education and somebody's reading off of PowerPoint slides, she just walks out and goes out and has lunch with her friends, and they read the PowerPoint slides that way, so we're not going to do that. All right. So change number one is to face reality. And I had to face reality. So I went out to San Francisco. I had been in Columbia, South Carolina for 13 and a half years before that. I went out there principally because of Metropolitan Yerasimos, a longtime friend, and I knew that I was not going to be in Columbia for my entire life. I wanted to move in my 50s, not in my 60s. And so that's what we did. But I knew that the parish had gone through the death of a priest and then the removal of a priest. But I was kept in the dark about a lot of things. I didn't know anything about the fog in San Francisco. That's not a big deal. The fog's charming. But I didn't know about the financial situation. I didn't have realistic expectations of what was going on in the parish. One of the things that we are working to do whenever possible in San Francisco is when a new priest comes in, is to have the priest and the parish council meet and talk about mutual expectations, talk also about what the reality of the parish is. This is very important. You know, how many times do we have a situation where a priest walks in and he says, you know what, I'm going to do services 5 nights a week, and the other people are saying, we need Father to get out and visit the homes. And then Father's doing church services, nobody comes. He goes, these people are all pagan, they don't know anything about the church. And they're all going, Father's lazy, he never goes out to visit the home. If they had talked about it ahead of time, there wouldn't be all those hurt feelings. Well, I was in the dark, and I had to come to grips with reality, something I'll talk about a bit more in a few slides. But then the parish had to embrace reality. You notice in the very top there it says blissful ignorance, and I think that describes a lot of our faithful. Not in a bad way. It's just, I think about my time as a layperson, as an adult layperson, going to church. If the lights were on, if the water was running, if the choir was singing, whatever, I didn't really care how that happened. I was there to worship. And that's most people, and that's quite frankly as it should be. All of us sitting here, we're in the sausage making business. But most people just want to eat the sausage. And that's fine. But it's not good to be ignorant if you are in trouble. Along with that, there was something unusual at Holy Trinity, and I describe it here as a shame-based denial. And the parish was, I think, in many ways ashamed of itself. They were still mourning the loss of Father Anthony. There was shame brought on the parish by the abrupt departure of a priest, and they felt really bad that they had jammed themselves up financially. And as I have mentioned before, and will mention again, shame is a paralyzing type of behavior. But one of the things that I did, and I confessed to this, I've confessed it to my own parish, they know I did it anyway, is I had to unmask the reality of the parish. And here's what I would do, is when we would get together for festal vespers or meetings or whatever, people would say, how's everything at Holy Trinity? And I'd go, awesome people, really good people, beautiful church, but we're going to be bankrupt in 4 or 5 years. It was true, 100% true. And you know, telegram, telegraph, telegreek, you know all about that, right? And so I would have my own faithful then come up to me and say, I was talking to my cousin in Oakland, and he said, we're going to be bankrupt in 4 or 5 years. I go, yeah, we sure are. And so word starts to get out, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. If you are going down in flames, you need to know you're going down in flames. You just can't live in some sort of a fantasy world, and that was beautiful, and that helped a lot. And the other thing that helped a lot, and it's hard for me to even talk about this because it was such a painful moment, but having a parish assembly meeting, maybe our third one there, and you all know what parish assembly meetings are like in some places. I wrote an article some years ago. If you've read my articles, I talk about how kids like to go to parish assembly meetings because the fights are so cool. And we're at a parish assembly meeting. You know, a lot of blame, a lot of finger pointing, but then a whole lot of Robert's Rules of Order, which I know well. I do. I won't go into why, but you know, we're there, and after enough of it, you know, one person, lovely person, but you know, stands up and goes, "Point of order," and so I stood up. I go, "Look," I said, "Yeah, it's really hard to talk about." You know, I said, "I left half my family on the East Coast, came out here, had no idea what was really going on. I get up in the middle of the night, go into my living room, get in the fetal position and cry, and you guys are talking about point of order. So we are going bankrupt, and we need to start doing some things." And everything changed. The meetings now became different, and they knew what reality was. And that was me coming to terms with what I had done to myself. Now, one of the first things we did really early on, we would have done it in 2008, but we got to it in 2009. We spent about 6 months figuring out who the right person would be. We brought in an outside consultant. And that's so important. I don't care how smart anybody is, how much you know. You could have somebody in your parish that has a Harvard MBA. Doesn't matter. You need an outside consultant. So what we brought in this consultant in 2009, local guy, Dale Solomon Brotherton, Lutheran pastor, expert in organizational behavior, and he did some really good things with us. He taught us how to set goals and accomplish tasks together. You say, what? Well, what's up with that? Well, if for the majority of the history of a church, it's been basically a priest-run church with the laity really not knowing how to do that, you need to learn how to work together, how to set goals and accomplish tasks. Little simple goals that lead to one success after another, and we did that. We developed a mission, vision, and value statement. I'm going to come back to our mission statement a little bit later on. And then he introduced something called the behavioral covenant that has become basically our model of how we do business, and we'll talk about that in some detail as well later on. In 2013, things were getting better. We were on the road to health. Not a name dropper, but I do call myself privileged to at least be an acquaintance, if not a friend, of Tom Bandy. Many of you have read his books. And Tom came and worked with us. And it was a little bit different experience because the parish council, we were beginning to dig out of the hole. There was a little bit less investment in working with a consultant. I didn't realize it at the time, but there had already been some incremental backsliding. And so there was a kind of a group of people in the parish leadership that were working against some of the changes that were happening. But of that visit, the single best thing that Tom did for us is he introduced the concept of the signature outreach ministry. And it means that this is the outreach ministry for which your church is known. So, and we do outreach for only one reason, because the church tells us to, because the Bible tells us to, because Jesus tells us to. But there are positive things that happen when we get out into the community and help people. And so if a church has a signature outreach ministry, then you become known as the church that. This is the church where my brother-in-law goes for his AA meetings. This is the church that has the after-school program for single parents. And it's not only about the visibility out in the world, but it's about the internal self-perception. It's like, yeah, we're the parish that has this following. That signature outreach ministry changes your own self-perception, because that's something you can really feel good about. Yeah, we're doing what Christ has asked us to do. And by the grace of God, we've arrived at a couple of those over the years. And then in 2018, we brought Dale back, our first consultant, and he had me do a time study. All of us operating under the assumption that the time study would reveal that we needed another priest, but in fact, what we discovered is we needed to make some strategic changes to our staff. We've already accomplished the middle one, communications. We have someone we pay part-time to do all of our communications, print media, social media, website, the whole bit. She's a faithful Christian lady, member of the parish, trained in design, so she does a better job than I ever could in half the time, 1/10 of the time, quite frankly. And we have a much better digital footprint because of her as well. We thought we were going to get a ministry coordinator. We made a job offer. That didn't work out very well. I think there's too many Tucker Carlson specials about San Francisco these days, so I'm not sure how it's going to happen to find somebody that doesn't own a television. And we're still working at trying to find somebody to administer our big projects. So we're in the process of adding to the staff strategically. We're taking our time. Those of you in the business world and in the church world, which includes, I think, just about everybody here, know that the single biggest mistakes you make are hiring the wrong person. Because once you've hired them, it's like, how do I get rid of this? So we're taking our time, and it's a good thing. So a little bit more on the behavioral covenant that was introduced to us in 2009 by Dale. And it's in your handout. So this whole part here, you can kind of read along. If you're getting bored, you can read it even more. And but I want to go right here. These are the things that we agree to. And we read this literally before every meeting, parish council and parish assembly. We used to read it together. Sometimes we take turns. Now I just read it. I read it very slowly. And on the back side of the covenant, there's a little grading sheet, so we occasionally will grade ourselves on how we're doing, although quite frankly, for the past number of years, we scored 10s on all of our grades. But I do want to read these in detail while you read along, knowing that Mad Dogmatic says PowerPoint makes you stupid, but hopefully this won't make you stupid. All right. We promise to pray alone together, to thank God and to ask for God's help in our lives and in our work for our church, and we promise to listen to God's answer to us. Actually, read it slower than that so we can think about it. We seek God's direction for our church, and we work to lead our church in that direction. We demonstrate our leadership and commitment to our church by our example. We treat each other with dignity and respect. We respect and care for each other, acknowledging each other's strengths and weaknesses. We actively value different perspectives. We promise to listen with an open, not judgmental mind to the words and ideas of the others in our church and on the council, especially if the issue raises tension. Our communication is detailed, timely, inclusive, and precise. We all do our parts to seek information when we need it and disseminate information when we have it. We promise to discuss, debate, and disagree openly in council meetings, expressing ourselves as clearly and honestly as possible so that we are certain that the council understands our point of view. We promise to support the final decision of the council, whether it reflects our view or not. And then we conclude with this prayer that I guess is apocryphally attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, but a beautiful prayer. And we hold each other to these. And even before, I had to throw a penalty flag on myself the other day in a meeting. I said, no, I shouldn't have done that. So I'm sorry. We hold ourselves to that standard behavior, and it shapes the way we treat one another. And then we made some deliberate changes to the parish council along the way. Very early on, we abolished term limits. I'm not a fan of term limits because you have this you have this accrued level of expertise and skill, and then you say, okay, get off the parish council so we can bring somebody in. Especially dangerous for a church like ours that was in danger of going under. If the ship's taking on water, you don't give the guy that knows how to plug holes shore leave. You've got to have that consistency. Some people say, well, what do you do if you have cantankerous people on the parish council? It's like, well, you need to fix that, right? But that's just my opinion, but we did that. The other thing is we moved towards consensus in our decision making. I'm old enough to remember, that sounds like a Ben Shapiro line, you Ben Shapiro fans. He always says that, and he's like 13, right? But I'm way richer than I am. But I am old enough to remember when consensus first started making its way into the Archdiocese. And consensus, of course, means coming to an agreement that everybody can agree on, coming to a decision that everybody can agree on. But early on, consensus was really meant the loudest person is going to keep talking until we all say, okay. If we say yes, will you be quiet? And that's not consensus. But real consensus means you have to listen to each other. You have to use that behavioral covenant. But we've actually gotten to the point now where it has been years since we have had a vote that wasn't unanimous. Because if something's going to come up for a vote and we're not in agreement, we say, whoa, what's wrong? We have to talk about this and figure out why we're not all agreeing by it. Liturgical participation became and continues to be our number one criterion for participation in the parish council, and my parish council is integrally involved in all aspects of church, from chanting to greeting to you name it, okay? And when we have a vacancy on the parish council and we say, well, who should we ask to be on? Somebody will say, oh, let's ask, Harry Smith over here. Anybody named Harry Smith? I doubt it. Okay, and they say, well, Harry doesn't come to church. He needs to come to church more before he's on the parish council. And I say amen to that. And the other thing is, we consciously began to look for diversity. Diversity in age ranges, diversity in cradle Orthodox versus people who have chosen to become Orthodox, ethnic diversity, and also diversity with regard to men and women. We always have at least 4 women in our parish council. And then there's our mission statement. And it says here, unwavering adherence to our mission statement. That is not an understatement in itself. There's our mission statement: to live our faith, grow our church, and serve the world as Orthodox Christians. That remains our mission statement. It's on our business cards, our letterhead, everything else. That is what we go by. That's who we are. And remember, Dale talked about this when we were writing this mission statement. He said, every good mission statement should be understandable by a 5th grader, and you should be able to recite it if somebody's holding a gun to your head. And that's our mission statement. It's just that clear, that simple, that's who we are. And the kind of the corollary to that is the question that guides so much of what we do is, will it grow the church? And there are many times when we're trying to decide, should we do such and such a thing? And somebody on the parish council will say, will it grow the church? Will it add anybody in the pews? No, let's not do it. It's a waste of time and money. And that's very much driven by that original work developing our mission statement. Early on, we did a couple of book studies. These are oldies but goodies. Again, I'm showing my age. It's just like when I used to carry my vestments in a Samsonite briefcase. Finally, somebody gave me one of those shirt deals now that all young guys use. But Purpose-Driven Church, I think, is a better church than Purpose-Driven Life. Everybody involved in church work should read it. If you read it and roll your eyes about anything you read in there, call me because you're wrong. It's really good. And then Steve alluded to 12 Keys to an Effective Church, another oldie but goodie, but it's a good way of getting your head around what's going right and what's going wrong in your church in kind of a more of a quantitative way. And I say this, I've got a bookshelf with gazillions of books about evangelism and church growth that I've read and love, but these remain very nice foundational books. And if you decide you don't want to continue doing a book study, that's fine, but we needed to do something to get people, bad pun, I'm a bad punster, not intended as a pun, on the same page. And then I introduced a concept that my friend Tom Bandy tells me is now passé, but I got it out of one of his books. He goes, yeah, I wrote that book in the 80s. But it's called a permission-giving church. And even though we weren't in the beginning, we were a priest-centered church, I told people we're a permission-giving church. It was on our website. Holy Trinity is a permission-giving church. And what that means is you've got a playing field. And the playing field is designed by your church mission, vision, and values, by church dogma, morality, etc., etc. And as long as you stay on the playing field, play your game. It's cool. And you don't to think that every great idea has to come from the priest or the parish council or be somehow managed by the priest and the parish council is a mistake, because it stifles creativity in my estimation. We had our annual women's retreat recently. A young couple came forward and said, we would like to do a children's retreat concurrent with that so that mothers can bring their children. It wasn't my idea, but it's a great idea, and they did it. That's what happens in a permission-giving church. So again, while that term is passé among some elements of church work, I still like it. And I think lots of our Orthodox churches, certainly Greek Orthodox churches, with which I'm very familiar, need to be more permission giving. And if somebody gets off the playing field, you put them back on, So somebody says, I want to have Vegas night or something. It's like, no, we can't. No offense to anybody from Vegas. But it's like, no, we're not doing that. Okay. All right. And then we had to talk stewardship. Money helps grow churches out of a mess, and churches need money to operate on. And we all know about the 3 T's of stewardship. But honestly, and I have said this on the internet before, I'm not afraid to say it, there's only one T that matters, in my estimation, that's treasures. Orthodox faithful, certainly Greek Orthodox faithful, I can't speak for other Orthodox traditions in America. Greek Orthodox faithful undergive. I was just telling Effie Marie that blessedly I'm coming off the Archdiocese Council after this summer's clergy laity, and I'm no longer in charge of allocations for our metropolis. But I've had the chance for a decade to see the finances of the Archdiocese, and especially how people give. And we typically undergive greatly. And all of you in your parishes know that. Even you can have a parish where you have some super givers, 19,000, 15,000 givers, but then I bet you're going to have half of your stewards are like at $500 or less. And there's nothing that's wrong with the Archdiocese today that money couldn't fix. Because tithing, you forget about it. There's a apocryphal statistic I heard some years back that if every Christian in America tithed, we could get rid of all poverty. Maybe true, probably true, but I would say if our faithful gave seriously, seminary wouldn't be jammed up, St. Nicholas would have been built a long time ago. It's just a fact. We undergive. So we talk money when we talk stewardship. And I know there's a lot of, I'll spend some time on this. Of course, there was no real history of stewardship in the parish because there didn't need to be. When I introduced how I wanted to do stewardship early on, the parish council totally had my back, but even then there was so much pushback. We like, okay, we'll back off for a year. But then it finally stuck. And lots of theories about how to do stewardship, but this is what works. So everything I'm telling you today is like what works. So at least it's worked for me. If it works for you, good. If it doesn't work for you, try something else. But we do our stewardship over the course of 1 month. There are 4 mailings, 4 sermons. There are testimonials, at least on 2 Sundays, by people. We publicly thank our givers by listing your names in the bulletin. We send thank you letters. I send thank you letters to everyone who pledges. And we follow up with people who are slow pledgers. In those mailings, yes, we do have pledge cards, and our pledge cards have suggested amounts that are realistic with regard to the support of the parish. You don't have like the $100 option on there. You got to write that in yourself. And we also typically, with regard to our theme of the year, we'll have a little booklet that goes along explaining what we're trying to do with stewardship. This year we also did a video to explain our stewardship theme. The letters themselves are simple and straightforward because it's just a matter of reminding people. Let's be honest, none of us really read stewardship letters that come from whatever, the XYZ organization looking for money. It's like, okay, is it good? Okay. Yeah. And that's it. People just need to be reminded. And it works. We have had an increase in stewardship year after year after year, just adhering to this very simple way of doing it. Little bit of financial vamping here, and Steve touched on this too. But it wasn't until 2004 that the church was really using QuickBooks in any way to develop actual financial reporting. And then over the years, we've continued to refine how we do our financial reporting, both our income and expense statement and our balance sheet. Remember, the balance sheet is important. A lot of people don't get that. We can talk about why later. But I'll tell you why now, because it shows how you're doing at a point in time versus a point in time earlier. So if your balance sheet is higher today than it was a year ago, you know you're going in the right direction, right? But the other part of, and by the way, everybody in here should be able to read a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement, because everybody in here has at least gone through the 8th grade, and that's all it requires. And if you're in church leadership, you have to do it. There's no excuse. Don't say whatever, I'm an ideas person. You got to be able to do it. But the other thing with finances is is don't do what we were doing at Holy Trinity, what a million parishes do everywhere, is you start your meeting, maybe you do a meditation after the prayer, whatever, you read the minutes, and then the financial report, and it's like 45 minutes long, and by the time you're done, everybody's tired, and there's no time to talk about anything with regard to growing the church. In fact, I am old enough to remember the 80s and 90s as a priest, and there were parishes where it would have this during the meeting. I moved to pay the bills. It's like, okay, what do you do? It's like they call the power company. It's like, hey, we moved not to pay the bills. I don't get that. So you have a finance and stewardship committee that's doing your grunt work so that you get to the meeting, so that you get the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty, the stuff you need to do, and you can talk about important stuff. Priest needs to change if you're going to change a parish. Priest needs to keep changing. And those of, and it's, by the way, it's great to see some of y'all I've known for a long time. Father Martin, I guess I've known you the longest, right? Since 1985? Man, 1985. And, but also, whatever. Where's President Jenny? Did a mission trip in 2001. It's very cool. But all y'all know me is I'm kind of like the same person all the time, right? Much to your chagrin, typically. And but I think that's very important. People need to see the priest growing and changing as a Christian. So I came to Holy Trinity. I was 51, I guess. I'm 63. I'm a different Christian now. People need to see that. People need to know that Christ is alive and at work in their priest. And they need to know that the priest cares, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Remember, what's the coaching cliche? People don't care what you know until they know that you care, and that is a fact. All right. So part of showing that you're caring is doing the basics right. Prayerful liturgy, and if you're repenting, you're going to do a prayerful liturgy. Some of you young priests don't have to fess up to it, but I know there's probably some Sunday morning you're like, oh man, it would be so cool to sleep in, right? And it's true. But once you get to the so-called what the French call la troisième âge, the third age, and you realize you're going to die, it's like, man, I can't wait to get to church. No, it's true. It's true. You'll see. You'll see. It's like, I got to get to church and pray. And people see that prayerful liturgy. You need to pay attention to preaching. It is super important. If somebody makes the mistake of coming to church a few minutes early and they hear the eothinon doxastikon, which is like, yeah, what does that mean? And then it's supposed to be chanted in Plagal of the fourth, but it's chanted in Plagal of the first. Even if it's chanted in a language they understand, people are not going to know the difference. I'm sorry to break it to you. And I'm one of those people. I can walk up, this is just by way of illustration. I could walk up to an analogian right now, chant any service cold. Nobody cares. If you walk into the pulpit not having prepared your sermon, the whole world knows. You're like at a party where you didn't know it was a dry party and you're the only person drinking. People know you've been drinking, okay? People know you haven't prepared your sermon. You need to pay attention to preaching. Otherwise, what kind of an example are we showing with regard to doing our work, responsibility, caring for each other? And then pastoral visitations, conversations, and making yourself accessible. I am a reforming enabler and rescuer, I will admit that. But I have learned to set boundaries in my life. At the same time, people know that if they want to talk to me, if they need me for something, that I will respond to their text, respond to their email, respond to their phone call, and make an appointment. And again, I make an appointment because if there's something that doesn't have to be dealt with right away, we'll take care of it. But people need to know that you're going to respond. And I will say as a commercial, priests that don't return emails and text messages, stop it. That's a Bob Newhart thing. Stop it. All right. If you don't, watch that one on YouTube if you want. All right. Experiment. Father Evan talked about this. Experiment. It's cool to experiment with things. We experiment with everything else. So why not? And I'll tell you, I tried some things that didn't work. I tried to institute an extra evening service once a week. So I said, well, let's do Compline extra night a week. Nobody came. Didn't change a thing. Okay. We did a blessing of the pets for a couple, 3 years. We had rescue pets. We had goodie bags from a pet store. And nobody really got interested in the church because of that. All my parishioners know I'm a dog lover. I can tolerate cats. I'm allergic to them. If you want your pet blessed, come by my office, I'll bless it. I'll come to your house and bless it. So we stopped it. Now, in my earnestness, I wanted to change the sermon time to right after the gospel, but people still kept coming late. They're good, beautiful people. They're just whatever. But sometimes people say, Father, you have so many converts. How do you know they've assimilated the faith? I go, well, they used to come early. Now they come late like everybody else. Sure. Yeah. And but in fact, just this past summer, we said we're going to move liturgy from 10:30 to 10 for summer hours. But what happened over summertime is we had the best summertime attendance ever, and now in the fall our attendance is picked up, so we're just leaving it. So that was one experiment that we did that worked, and we are keeping on with. And then preachers need to preach about growth. If you preach about growth and mission every Sunday, people get tired of it and they go, enough already. But if you don't speak about it often enough, people forget. So you need to keep reminding them. And again, what's that old preaching aphorism? Our job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And so you need to afflict people and tell them, yeah, we need to grow. And then a lot of us priests have to fess up and you say, we're going to change the culture of our church by changing the music. And not true. Nobody knows anything about music. Nobody cares as long as it's decent. If people are running out of the church, holding their ears, yeah, change it. But otherwise, nobody wins a choir war. When I came to Holy Trinity, it still have beautiful people in the choir, Christian people, a dedicated, beautiful Christian choir director, and just there's no but there, just wonderful. And if you've ever been in a situation in a church where you've had the choir director and or chanter that hate you, that's like such a drag. It's so wonderful to have a loving relationship with your church musicians. But the choir was doing very elaborate music, all in Greek, and I looked at the age of the choir, and I knew this was unsustainable. Good California word, but it was unsustainable. And so over time, I talked to the choir director about where we're going, how we're going to get there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll talk more about that later. But don't mess with the music. Nobody. I hate to break all y'all chanters who spent 7 years in Holy Cross learning how to chant. Sorry, And I still listen. I still learn new things in Byzantine music. I confess to that. But that's the way it is. All right. And then priests, you got to protect your flock. That's a good. I wish His Eminence were still here, because this is a Kallistos swear word. It's always in his hymns. Calumny is slander. But if you hear somebody slandering the church, pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I heard you got some complaints. I'm going to come talk to you." Typically, they're going to shut up. You have to stress spiritual, mental, and emotional health. That just looks like one of a number of items, but that's key. We talk about emotional health. We talk about family health. We address it. We write about it. We absolutely stress it. Holy Trinity is one of those parishes where people come, and if they stay around, they're going to get healthier. They get healthier because people there are getting healthier together. And quite frankly, people who don't like being healthy end up leaving because it's too uncomfortable. In the church world, some of you have heard me before. I've heard me say this. I don't mind repeating it. The household, the family is the practice field, and the church is game day. So when you have a church filled with dysfunctional families, don't be surprised that your church is dysfunctional and in need of change. Some words on gossip. There's always going to be some level of gossip in the Navy, where I spent my misspent youth from age 17 to 28. There was a saying that a complaining sailor, they don't say that word, a complaining sailor is a happy sailor. If you're in an organization where the sailors aren't complaining, they're no longer invested in that organization. So some level of gossip is healthy. Every priest in here, please know that every time you walk into a room, everyone in there, including your wife and children, have said something bad about you. It's just the way it is. It's the way it is. But too much gossip is toxic. And remember, toxic is one of these overused words today. I was in a toxic relationship for 2 weeks. It's like, no, you weren't. But if I'm in a lake and I dump something icky in the lake out of a paper cup, that's not toxic. That's just inconsiderate. Fine. But if you have a big old factory in the lake pumping in lots of chemicals, that's toxic. It will ruin the lake. Lots of gossip will ruin a church. And the best thing to do is, first of all, set a good example, all of us, but then redirect people. If somebody has a complaint about somebody else, say, well, talk to them. Well, I can't talk to them. It's not that important. Then shush. It's not that important then. And yes, allow people the freedom to leave. San Francisco has 2 Greek Orthodox churches. There are 10 Greek Orthodox churches in the Bay Area, probably 30 plus Orthodox churches in the Bay Area, whatever. And people are going to find their place where they're happy, and that's cool. That's totally cool. I want people to go to church where they feel like they fit in. I'm going to talk about small groups, and I promise to upload all my small groups material to that Dropbox folder if you're all interested. I was first exposed to small groups in the 1980s when I had the privilege of hearing Lyman Coleman speak, who I think in many ways is the kind of the father of the small groups movement in America. But you know, small groups are different than Bible study. When I came to Holy Trinity, there was a Bible study. All of us have been to Bible studies, have seen this as lay people, whatever, as priests. But the Bible study, first of all, it meets a week after week after week after week with no breaks. The priest is in the front of the room, and he'll say, okay, Susie Cakes, read verses 5 through 10, and she reads it, and then he'll say, okay, well, you notice in verse 6 that in the Greek, that's a continuous past tense, so they were actually doing this over a period of time, not just once. And everybody go, got it, got it. And because it goes week after week after week after week, people go, I will come for a month, I'll just start coming again, and they stop coming. You get the same people. Some people will say, I've been going to the same Bible study for 30 years. Oh, great, okay. If I had a CPR class, they would come to the CPR class. They just would do anything, right? And you know, by the way, priests, you've done this, right? You do a Bible study of the 10 Commandments. You get done, you say, oh, that went pretty well. Any questions? Yeah, and back. Father, how often should I receive communion? All right, that's it. Small groups. Small groups puts people just like y'all around a table, sitting around, and without the supervision of a priest. Those of you who are afraid to read the Bible without being supervised by a priest, you've probably done a lot worse things in your life, more dangerous things. I know I have. The small groups are designed to meet at a specific date and time for a fixed number of days and times, so that people know that I can do this for 8 weeks and I can stop going. The curriculum is based on affective learning, tying in emotions to what you are learning, because we know that we retain material better when we tie in our emotions. Also, we can develop relationships with people if we're talking about our emotions. So a typical small groups question would be, say you're talking about Jesus walking on the water, Peter coming out into the water. A typical small groups question would be, has there ever been a time in your life when you have been inspired to try to do something you think you couldn't do? How would you feel today if Jesus asked you to step out on the water and take a bold step? And you have to explain your answer. And so by sharing these things, you grow together, it develops a level of intimacy, it begins to change the people who are part of those groups. And it does absolutely change the culture of the church to have a vibrant small groups program. And I'll talk a little bit more about ours in just a sec. So in 2008, we had that Bible study, and I just let it kind of go the way it should. And we brought in some people from the outside to teach us how to do small groups. One of them was a man named Norman Smith, who at that time was pastoring a local Protestant church. And then we did, and I had, by the way, since hearing Lyman Coleman speak, everything I've ever written for summer camps, for adult education, has always been using that type of a model, that small groups model. But I wanted to incorporate it into the church, and I wanted somebody from the outside to say, here's what you all need to do.
Could you repeat that name again, please?
Lyman Coleman. But if you go now, there's so much small groups curricula out there, you could spend like 3 days nonstop surfing the web looking at all of it. But regardless, we did our training, and we did our first generation of small groups. Went well. I was there kind of orchestrating, moving, not present, but letting the groups meet. Generation 2, it started to become very priest-focused again, probably because of things I was doing, I think also just probably out of the needs of the people, and I said, no, we got to stop this. This is not what we want. But then lo and behold, Norman became Orthodox, decided to come Holy Trinity, and I said, Norman, you are retired now, but you're not retired because I'm putting you in charge of small groups. And we used the model that he used at his church. which is the model that he introduced originally to us anyway. But it's called Faith and Fellowship. But rather than meeting in individual homes, because San Francisco is such a bear with regard to parking, and if you do find a parking spot, you're going to come out and find your window broken. No lie. All right, so we all come to the church on the same night, but we meet just like this. You're at different tables. You meet with the same group every week. Dinner starts at 6:30. You make your way in. You have dinner after you get off of work. We get to our groups at 7:15. Near the end, there's a little wrap-up, and then everybody's out the door at 8:30. So people know that Faith and Fellowship is going to take place from this date to this date. Then there's going to be a break. Like for us, our break starts right before Holy Week. Boom, that's it. Those are the days. I can make those days. It's changed who we are as a parish. Just absolutely, changed who we are as a parish. And as an added bonus, we do ours on Tuesday nights, since Protestants go to church on Wednesday nights. So you can invite your Protestant friends, and it's been a way of introducing people into Holy Trinity by inviting them to small groups. I will say that relationship-based ministry, small groups, is our only format of ministry at Holy Trinity. Nothing else. That's all that we do, regardless of what form it takes, and regardless of the age group. Even with itty-bitties, if you're sitting around doing a little craft, you're still spending time in relationship with them. And you got to play to your strengths. And that's important because Holy Trinity is in San Francisco. And it's very easy for us to go, man, I'd love to be like fill in a blank. It's churches I know well. Scottsdale, Arizona. They have all these families, and yeah, it's Scottsdale, Arizona. But San Francisco, this is the truth. San Francisco has more dogs than children, more abortions than live births, more drug addicts than high school students. You don't have a lot of families. So what do? Do you wring your hands and say, gosh, I wish we had 150 kids in our dance program that ever went to church on Sunday? No, I don't want that either. Okay. But you say, no, you got to be who you are. But here's who Holy Trinity is. Holy Trinity values fellowship. They like to be together. And people who join the church like that themselves, and they like then to be with each other. Those of you who, and I've said this too, of course, we cynically say, oh, coffee hour is the 8th sacrament. Coffee hour is important. Read your Bible. People are always eating together. And I gotta break it to you, nobody's ever playing basketball together in the Bible, but they're eating together all the time. Eating together is important. And just talking to all y'all priests to be in the future, people say, oh, I'm so tired after liturgy. Can't I just sit and have a cup of coffee? No. I like coffee. Get a mug that you can carry around. But you need to be with your people during coffee hour. They value that fellowship. Our parish is naturally warm and welcoming. I've had one visitor say, I couldn't stand it here. It was like a Baptist church. For him, as a compliment. We stress authenticity, and I think along with being warm and welcoming, authenticity is a big part of having a healthy church. And obviously, it gets demonstrated on various levels, including for me. Like I said, I'm the same person all the time. God forgive me. But at Holy Trinity, if you're not Greek, you don't have to try to be Greek. If you came from Greece 50 years ago, or you came from Greece 3 years ago, it's cool. If you're white bread American, that's fine. If you're Latino, that doesn't matter. Just be who you are. People come to church in nice suits, blue jeans. We really don't care. Just be who you are. Don't try to be something else. And that leads to a lot of drama reduction right there, because it puts a lot of pressure on somebody when they have to try to be who they're not. We do have, even though we don't have a lot of kids, we do have lots of adults. Young adults, middle adults, and older adults. And so we have the Orthodox Forum for young adults that meets twice a month in a small group setting. We have our Faith and Fellowship group, and we have our seniors group that gets together and plays games and goes out to lunch, but then I also will meet with them once a month for a discussion. So play to your strengths, play to your strengths, play to your strengths. Stop wringing your hands about what you could be but can't be because of your demographics. We start a missions evangelism team. Just saying you have it is like really good. It's like once you say our church has a missions and evangelism team, even if they don't do anything, you start to feel better about yourself. Fact, and it's absolutely true. We have and continue. We have supported and continue to support foreign missions, sending people on missions trips, supporting foreign missionaries. We sent people to Project Mexico for a long time. Continues to be part of who we are. We've gone through 2 different iterations of missions and evangelism. We're actually on our 3rd. It's okay to kind of stop meeting for a while and then regroup so you can shape a new vision. Visions need to be kind of ongoing and dynamic. And I list there Help Portrait. Help Portrait is something we did for a number of years. You may or may not be familiar with it. In Help Portrait, people who have limited means can come and have a very nice studio quality picture taken. And so it typically happens the first Saturday of December. It's an international movement, and it brings not only the people who want their pictures taken into your church, but also the photographers and the photo editors. And the reason we've kind of backed off of it is nowadays with phones, pretty much everybody's got access to pictures. It's less important. And that was for a long time a big part of what our quote-unquote signature outreach ministry was. But then what happened with us during our 2nd iteration of missions and evangelism, we started getting out and trying to bring food to people out on the street. And this is an example of how God works. If you're doing the right thing, He'll give you the right surprise and bless you in ways you couldn't imagine. So we're trying to give food to people out in the street, and we developed a relationship with the San Francisco Food Bank. We say, can we get food from you all? And they go, yeah, you can, but you know what? We need a distribution point in your part of San Francisco. So long story short, we are the Saturday morning distribution point for our neighborhood. And so they bring a big old truck of groceries and whatnot there. We set it up, and then the clients come onto the church grounds and get their weekly groceries. We also do deliveries to people in the neighborhood that can't get their groceries. And not all the volunteers are from our church. The volunteers are people who just like to do good things. So you're getting onto your church grounds, the people being served, the people serving, the people, everybody's interacting with your church community. They get a chance to see the church. And yes, lo and behold, somebody goes, what, is the Holy Trinity? And they go, oh yeah, that's where my grandmother gets her groceries every week. That's your signature outreach ministry. And even if you've got a parishioner who's never volunteered there, you can be very certain that they're proud to say that, yeah, people come to our church to get fed. We never planned on it. It was not part of any long-term vision. God just put it on our lap because we were struggling, praying about what our signature outreach ministry should be. And we are in the process of working on developing a 2nd one now. Changing church means leveraging tech. The 2 really go hand in hand. Remember, tech is not just your way of communicating to the outside world. It's also it's a mirror that points back onto the church. Your people will use tech, and it affects how they feel about their church. This slide is entitled Phone Follies, and it's because in 2008 we actually had an answering service, like Cary Grant in one of those old movies comes back to the office and they go, oh yes sir, Mr. Jones called, he wants a 2:30 appointment, and the doctor called, he said your preparation age, oh shh, don't say that, okay, but I can't believe it was 2008, we didn't, like answering machines, that was like, weren't they invented sometime? So we actually started using an answering machine type of thing, but then we went right away to an auto attendance system. Now auto attendance systems can be off-putting, but ours, I don't think is, because, and I ripped this idea off from Group Magazine when I had to call them once, but you call our church and it says, hi, this is Holy Trinity, or hi, this is Father Aris, pastor of Holy Trinity. If you'd like to speak to me, press 3 now. Boom, that's it. If somebody needs me, they press 3. Again, I don't enable and rescue. If I'm busy, I'll let it go to voicemail. I'll check it later. And I check it fairly soon. And if I'm not there, it goes to my cell phone. But everybody who calls the church knows that if they need me, they're going to get me right away. And most people respect it. The only ones who don't are like the florists. Yes, I want to deliver flowers. It's like, okay, well, that's really interesting. I'm in a hospital right now, so I can't help you. But it's fantastic. And then we keep our auto attendance such that people can go right through the menu, boom. And yeah, people like it. People want to know that their priest cares enough to respond to them. Another thing that we did with regard to tech is we upgraded our sound system, which needed it badly. I won't go into how that works, but if you all have sound system issues, I can tell you how to fix it. It cost you $30,000. And the beautiful thing about it is that it was at a time when we were digging out of our mess, and to be able to raise $30,000 was an accomplishment, number one. And then to increase the quality of worship, made people feel really good about themselves. There's those little, not so little victories that are so key. And then there's the website. Remember, the website is not just about how you project yourself into the outside world. Your own people check the website. When I got there, we did have a website, praise God, but it had lots of pictures of the church and very detailed descriptions of the history of Holy Trinity. And the message was, this is a really nice museum. You should visit it before you die. That was the message. And then we took the website and we started putting pictures of people on there, lots of smiling people, different kinds of people. That was the message we wanted. It got moved over to a better platform, a more attractive platform, and then we leaned it up. And all this has happened over the course of really a decade. And because nowadays people like 1 click, 2 click, they're out of there, right? You know, too long, did not read, boom, boom, boom. People want the information, that's it. Still lots of smiling people, still lots of ways to say, here's how you connect to something going on at the church, but it's simple, it's lean, and we keep revising it, knowing that your website has to reflect who you are. If your website says, St. Barsanuphios, a warm and welcoming Orthodox church, and somebody walks into St. Barsanuphios and nobody talks to them, they go, hey, change your website. Yeah. But when your own people look at that and they go, a warm and welcoming Orthodox church, you go, yeah, we are. It reinforces things. And church management software, Steve alluded that too. You can talk to Ephemeria about church management software, but we didn't have it. We were using Microsoft Access when we got there. People like to be able to call the church office and say, how much do I owe on my 2019 pledge? You can tell them, boom, right away. People like to be connected to their management software. Lots of ways you can leverage that as a church leader. I have our communications people. Our communications person, I should say, has us very involved in social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Quite frankly, God forgive me, I'm 63, things I don't use, but I pay somebody to do it because I know that people value it and they use it. And your own people feel good. When they go on Instagram and they see the picture of the women's retreat, they go, yeah, I didn't get a chance to go, but we did that. That's very cool. We use Ages Initiative, as a lot of us do. We put it right on our website so that if you go to church on Sunday, you can click on the service right there. I recommend doing that. You can make a donation via text. I really like the thing about walking into the church and getting texted, we're so glad you're here. I want to find out how to do that. People, because if people want to give. And like I've actually had this experience where somebody walks in, hey, Father, I'm new here. Could I fill out a pledge card? And I can't find a pledge card. It's like, are you kidding? That's wrong. All right. And then we do a video stream as a way of connecting our shut-ins and also knowing that people church shop with video streams. And then some concluding thoughts here. Things happen when you have this permission-giving church, when you start to change the culture, when you're developing consensus, when you have little successes that go to bigger successes. And so we've had a wellness ministry just emerge out of kind of our small groups and outreach where they go on hikes and things like that. No, I never said, we need a wellness ministry. It just happened. The women's retreat that we do annually now came out of our women's small group. The women's small group doesn't meet anymore because they said, hey, we go to the Faith and Fellowship, that's enough, let's just keep doing that. But the women who were involved turned it around and made it a women's retreat, which I think every year just keeps getting better and better. And we have at least one person here who was present, and I think it was a great day. Not on here because I did these slides like whatever, December, October, whenever we were supposed to, whatever, but we have a couples ministry emerging now. And again, I didn't say we need a couples ministry. People say we're just going to do that. So you get good organic results when things start to change, which is like really different from the days when people were saying, well, how are we going to pay off this debt and what's wrong with us? Yeah. Some words on backsliding, and you will backslide. Father Evan mentioned that. Once you're out of danger, especially, it's like if you have a Republican and a Democrat in a life raft, they're going to get along until they get on shore, and then all of a sudden things fall apart again. It's just a fact. So you need to keep preaching about mission, and once that backsliding happens, you need to nip it in the bud because it's not going to go away. And you nip it in the bud by addressing it head on with people who are grumbling and mumbling, because again, it won't magically disappear. And lots of people say, I don't know, I just don't like conflict and confrontation. Well, yeah, the only people like conflict and confrontation are like in prisons, right? But you have to overcome it. I have to tell me, you have to overcome that to nip that in the bud. I put on here the quest for a program-based church, and I use in the circle terminology is Tom Bandy terminology. Underneath is Father Evan Armitage terminology, but they mean the same thing. and there's actually a fourth size. I'm not going to talk about it now. But the family-sized church is the small church started by a few families, still run by a few families. The priest is kind of an afterthought. You know, he typically doesn't even get to see stewardship data if there is such a thing. And lots of our churches operate that way. Lots of churches everywhere in the world operate that way. And the goal, of course, is to move from there to being a pastor-sized church, not only with regard to the size of the church, but the dynamics, so that the priest is the head of the church. And the good news is that we have lots of experience now in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, people sitting in this room who teach this and do this for a living. We have lots of experience about how to get a church from being a dysfunctional family-sized church into a functioning pastor-sized church. We know how to do it. It's not rocket science, nor is it reinventing the wheel. But for me, my goal, and I don't know if I'll live long enough or serve long enough at Holy Trinity to do this, but my dream is for us to become a so-called program-sized church, what Father Evan calls empowered and engaged, where we get to the point where there's so much happening that the pastor can't keep track of all of it, and so many things are going on that he becomes a manager of what's happening around him while still attending to his pastoral duties. And quite frankly, we don't know how to do that yet as Orthodox very well. We're all kind of stumbling there, but any of you all that gets there first, let me know and write the book, because that should be our goal, is to get to that point where we're not this priest-dependent, priest-centered church where we have so much dynamism that we can't possibly keep track of all of it. This slide goes back to my aviation, where you can never escape your youth, right? Even though I've been a priest over half the time, or I've been ordained over half the time I've been alive, still you got your youth. So check your 6, and these are 6 things that I consider to be essential elements of a highly functioning church, a healthy church, if you will. It has to be warm and welcoming. If it's not, fix it. There's lots of ways to fix it. Read books, get a consultant, but you got to be warm and welcoming. There has to be quality preaching. Let me say that again. There has to be quality preaching. You don't have to be a skilled orator, but you got to prepare your sermon. Use small groups. Every place that small groups has ever been used in any church anywhere in the world, there has been success that's emanated from it. Strive for a signature outreach ministry. You want to be known as the church that does at least one thing really well in service of the community. Use the internet. It's there. If you're like me and could care less about Facebook and all that stuff, hire somebody to do it for you. And yes, if the music doesn't stink, leave it alone. Leave it alone. If it does stink, fix it, but leave it alone. Now, as a kind of a denouement with regard to the choir. So, I guess maybe you're talking choir, because I'd say coda, but if you're not a musician, that made no sense. So, over the course of talking with my choir, seeing how things were headed, we kind of made preparations for those, the sopranos. You know how sopranos become altos over time, and the whole, we knew that was going. And so today, if you were to visit Holy Trinity, what you're going to hear on Sunday morning is a very simple liturgy that's easy to sing along with, and principally in English. And it did not happen as a result of a series of meetings. It didn't happen as a result of me threatening. It didn't happen because the choir director resigned in a huff. It just happened because we prayed about it, gave it time, saw where the trajectory was, and just eased our way into it in a very beautiful way. But the choir consisted of beautiful Christian, wonderful people. When I got there, it still does. But the music is markedly different. And with regard to the health of the parish and people being able to sing along, with regard to the growth of the parish, I think in a better spot. And I'm glad this is going on the internet, because I thank my choir and my choir director for having the courage to do that. I mentioned stories at the beginning, and we talked about old Costa. You can use that joke again, by the way. It's pretty cool, right? But I like stories, and I'm really grateful for the story in my life and what's been going on through. Really, I've had a blessed and privileged life as an adult, but certainly this past dozen years at Holy Trinity. But very grateful for where's Father Jim? For Father Jim and Stacy, and then for all the Archdiocese people, for the people on the committee, Tamaida and we have Father Luke, and who else is here? Father Evan, and all, and who are doing a lot to help us address this issue of church growth and renewal. Super grateful to people in Columbus. Not only a beautiful church, what a beautiful city. And I feel bad because when I was in Thanksgiving, I was eating dinner with Lisa and Isaac, and I was kind of like busting on them. I said, man, they're sending me to Columbus, Ohio. I can't believe it. It's a beautiful city. So thank you, people from Columbus. This has been a super great event, and thank you all for coming. And before we break for lunch, I want all of us to remember that in the story of the Archdiocese, we're at an inflection point. We're opening up a new chapter. That chapter has been opened ever since Father Jim started doing his work, and we keep writing more and more of it. There's the gathering in Beaverton, there's this gathering, there's the work that all of us are doing individually. But all of us together are partners in writing this next chapter of the story of the Archdiocese in America. And the truth of the matter is that the most important thing we can do, the closest attention that should be paid, is in fact to the health of our parishes. Because as our parishes get healthier, lots and lots of good things happen around us. All right.